Yes, ladies and gentlemen, today the state of the world welcome to another edition of Thank you, REM. Without further ado, see him in the green one. We were talking a little bit before. With every college football guest who covers every team, I always have to give them a proper introduction. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. That's your OleMiss Football running red. That is the fight song for Ole Miss. Dare I say, it's okay year. A lot more was expected out of it. With a team that leaned together. But without further ado, let's bring him on. That's Brian Rippee. Brian, thanks for coming on, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here.
So let me go back to last year. Obviously, to start off gangbusters, they're 4-0. Been an inexplicable loss to Kentucky, by the way. I mean, I watched that game and I don't know if they just decided to show up and thought they were going to win. But that was a bad loss. Obviously, they beat South Carolina. That was at South Carolina. It was a hell of a win. Great defensive effort. The LSU game was tough. I didn't expect them to lose that. Then they were off. They finished up the season strong, beating Georgia, Oklahoma, and Arkansas in there. And, of course, the last game of the year as far as they lost to Florida, my Gators, which they have another tough schedule this year. And, of course, they win the Egg Bowl, and then they beat the hell out of Duke in the bowl game, the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl. So when you go back to last year, Brian, okay, I'll give you the LSU one. Florida got hot late. I think the game against Kentucky, it was still a head scratcher. I thought that particular loss kept them out of the college football playoff. What do you?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Really, any of the three. I mean, losing to LSU, in Death Valley, there's no shame in that, for the lack of a better phrase. But they also lost that game and they trailed for a grand total of 0 seconds, which you almost never see. I mean, that's almost impossible to lose a game in which you never trail for any sort of time. And yeah, it was, you flip a coin. It's the Kentucky loss or the Florida loss. The Kentucky one is certainly more inexplicable. They were 3-score favorites at home. And it really outlined a theme for the other two losses. I thought all three losses Ole Miss had last year followed a very similar pattern. And it gets into like a larger thing of Ole Miss did not handle being like the hunted and being a college football playoff contender from the preseason. I mean, it started at SEC Media Days. They got questions. It was playoff or bust. The core of that group labeled it like the last dance, which I think was a marketing error. But hey, it's a bunch of 18 to 22-year-old kids. What are you going to do? And they just didn't handle it very well. And I think Kentucky was the first shock to their system. And then really after that, anytime they got in any sort of tight game in the fourth quarter, things did not go very well. If you think, well, they beat Georgia, well, they beat Oklahoma and Arkansas. Well, neither of those games Arkansas and Georgia weren't actually one-score games entering the fourth quarter. It was Ole Miss trying to just salt away a game. Oklahoma was so injury-riddled. I do think that game was one score entering the fourth quarter technically, but it was like Ole Miss playing with their food more so. And, I mean, in the three losses last year, the only touchdown Ole Miss scored in the second half was in the Kentucky game where Trey Harris on like a 4th and 8 caught a ball short of the first down marker. His defender slipped, and he took it like 47 yards for a touchdown. And the play calling got tight. The running game and the running back management was a complete disaster. And so Ole Miss did not handle being in the center of the spotlight and handling expectations very well, which has kind of been a knock on Lane Kiffin since he's been a head coach. He's won a ton here at Ole Miss. He's, arguably the greatest coach of the modern era at Ole Miss. I don't even think that's actually arguable, but they didn't handle that very well last year. And so, yeah, take your pick. Florida, Kentucky. Kentucky's probably more inexplicable. One of those two cost them the playoff that was incredibly attainable. And hell, if they'd have gotten in, who knows?
Ladies and gentlemen, that's Brian Rippee. I forgot to Rippee Wright .substack.com. You can sign up now. Half off the original cost of $0.00. Podcast part of at Rebel Grove at MPW_digital network, former MIAS athlete. I went back and took a look at some of the statistics from last year on Ole Miss, which I do all the time. You just have to bear with me because my Verizon pad's kind of slow. So scoring, they were 10th in the nation. Offensively, it wasn't a problem. But when you get to the defensive side of the ball, they were first against the run nationally last year. But it was on the back end that they struggled. Teams that knew really that they couldn't run against them, Brian, you can't run against them. Let's just air it out and see what happens. And it sort of bit them in a couple of games, to be quite honest with you.
It did a little bit, but I think some of that is misleading. I think Ole Miss, being the numbers they put up overall offensively, that was a lot in the first 4 or 5 games of the season where they beat the hell out of Middle Tennessee, Georgia Southern, half decent weight team. But I think a lot of that, and then you had the Arkansas game in SEC play was really the only one where they kind of exploded offensively. The defense, in my opinion, where they were a little bit susceptible in the back end, I think that reared its ugly head in the second half against LSU. But some of that was Ole Miss was so dominant defensively. Their offense didn't help them a ton, and teams are often down, 1 or 2 scores late in the game and throwing on them. And so some of that's a little bit misleading. They needed to be a little bit better on the back end of the secondary. But honestly, if you're pointing to what went wrong last year, Lane Kiffin and this offense, like if they were being honest with themselves, would point the thumb and wonder, why couldn't they run the football? Why could they not move the football when they had to with any sort of consistency in the second half? It seemed like when Trey Harris went out and he missed Lane Kiffin kept calling him the most talented receiver in the country. I'm not necessarily sure I totally disagree with that, but he wasn't on the field very often. And when he wasn't on the field, they were a little bit lost initially until after the LSU game, and they kind of recalibrated. And so, yeah, they needed to be a little bit better on the back end on the defensive side. But I think a lot of the offensive stats in terms of them being top 10, top 15 nationally is actually pretty misleading, because when you go look at it from an SEC play perspective and you look at the defenses they played in their 3 losses, it tells a bit of a different story. And they just couldn't run the ball when they had to. And when they had to have a touchdown in 2023, they pretty much always answered. And in 24, for whatever reason, they just couldn't do it.
Is Lane too pass happy?
No, historically speaking, no, because ever since he'd been at Ole Miss until last year, they had been top 3 in the conference in rushing. And I think 2 of those years led the conference in rushing. What was interesting to me, and I wrote about this a couple of times last year, is early on in the 2023 season, Ole Miss survived a road win at Tulane. Tulane had its back. It was a ranked Tulane team, but they had their backup quarterback playing. The Michael Pratt kid was hurt. And Ole Miss kind of escaped that game by the skin of their teeth. I think the final score is like 17 points, but that's a 1-score game going in the fourth quarter. Ole Miss ran for fewer than 100 yards for only like the second time in the Lane Kiffin era at that point. And Lane's quotes after the game were like, "This is highly concerning. We've run the ball, pretty much at will the entire time I've been here. We got to figure it out." They ended up being a pretty good running team. Quinshon Judkins will do that for you. Well, they didn't have him this year, and they didn't this past year, and they didn't do a very good job of replacing him. And Lane talking about the running game and the mysterious non-usage of Ulysses Bentley was bizarre. He didn't really say it was a problem. He just kind of kept saying it is what it is. Meanwhile, his rushing offense did not mirror anything close to what it had been his first 4 years at Ole Miss. And so I don't necessarily think he's too pass happy, because the running game is kind of the engine that makes everything go. And last year it wasn't there, and the offense sputtered as a result when it mattered.
So you said, Mississippi was 47th overall in the country rushing. Like the first 4 games, obviously numbers are going to be inflated. When I took a look at I was trying to go back to last year actually, and try and look at some of the stats. Defensively, they were fantastic up front. It was just the back end a little bit. And then offensively, I thought really what hurt them was when Judkins left, I was just as surprised as anybody. I don't know why he left. I don't know what the grumblings were that you heard down there, but I think maybe if they would have had a Quinshon Judkins last year, the season might have been a little bit different.
Yeah, sure. So he left because, I mean, it was kind of a classic. There were a lot of factors at play in that. It was predominantly over a money dispute. It was a
Of course.
kind of, yeah, exactly. Kind of everything, like anything else in modern college athletics today. It was probably best for both sides that they part ways. I didn't really have a problem with Ole Miss letting Quinshon Judkins walk. They didn't really do much to replace him. They brought in a kid named Rashad Amos, who had started at South Carolina, ended up at Miami of Ohio, really didn't play a factor the entire year. Ulysses Bentley, who was a really good Robin to Judkins Batman for the better part of 2 years, they kind of built him as like, hey, we're good. Like we have this guy. Bentley's played a lot of SEC football. He's an SMU transfer 2 years ago, I guess that would have been. And then they just didn't play him. And that was kind of the story of last season. People were very frustrated by that. When you talk about the running game and trying to paint an accurate picture of what it actually was, Ole Miss had one guy run for 100 yards in an SEC game last year, and it was Ulysses Bentley, and it basically came by accident. They played him on a 3rd or 4th and short against LSU for the first time in significant action all year, and he busted it 56 yards for a touchdown as part of a 10 carry, 110-yard game, and then he disappeared again. So they didn't use him. In that Florida loss last year, Ole Miss ran the football in that game 35 times, and 10 carries went to running backs. I'm not sure at which point you've probably lost the plot, but I would say when you run 35 times and 25 of them go to non-running backs, I think 15 of them went to a defensive lineman, J.J. Pegues. They were totally out of sorts running the football last year. And so I don't think it was as much, as talented as Quinshon Judkins is. They didn't, once he left, they thought they had enough there with Ulysses Bentley, but then didn't play him. And so I to this day, I cannot explain to you why that happened or what happened, but it was a staff mismanagement issue for sure.
So obviously Jackson Dart is gone now. Talk to me about where they need to improve. Who is the front runner, or has there been a starter named? I didn't see anything, but who's the front runner as far as the quarterback goes? What did they do in the transfer portal? I hate the transfer portal because it's just like a carousel. Your head starts spinning. So the Dart era is over. Highly successful era. I'd say he was a better quarterback than Eli Manning, to be quite honest with you. But where does the team stand right now post spring?
Austin Simmons will be the starting quarterback for Ole Miss, and he's an interesting dude. I'm working on a story on him right now that I think will be out within the next couple weeks. But a prodigy by all means. He graduated high school in the 10th grade. He joined the Ole Miss football program at 16 or 17 years old in 2023. Was a dual sport guy. He played football and baseball his first year on campus, the 2023 football season, 2024 baseball season. Actually pitched some meaningful innings for Ole Miss. Tore up his elbow, required Tommy John surgery. And then after the 2024 football season, when it became apparent he would be the starting quarterback next year, that baseball dream kind of magically, they kicked that to the side because football is what pays the bills. Really talented kid, left-handed quarterback from South Florida. Really, for the lack of a better phrase, has kind of been bred for this from the time he was really 10, 11 years old. Austin was homeschooled in high school. He's not attended a brick and mortar school since I think the 7th grade, and has really been programmed for this. So smart kid, a lot of weight on his shoulders. You saw the one drive against Georgia when Dart rolled his ankle. The kid led him for a touchdown drive that put Ole Miss up 7-0 and really changed the course of that game, or maybe 7-7 after Georgia scored. But that's really all we've seen from him. So pretty high expectations, but a wildly talented kid that I'm very interested to see what it actually looks like over the course of a full season.
Where do they need to improve the most this year going into the fall? Well, I don't like calling it fall camp because it's not fall camp. It's summer camp.
Well, they got a lot of replace on the defensive line, but Pete Golding has been a good defensive coordinator for Ole Miss, and so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt until they start getting gashed up front. I really think Ole Miss really struggled on the offensive line last year. It wasn't necessarily a raw talent issue. They went and got 2 kids for whatever the portal value was back then, which seems like ages ago, just a full year and a half ago, portal wise from Washington, paid top dollar for them, had an injury or two early on and just never really gelled. I don't think you can blame the offensive line failures on injury last year. I think a lot of it was a coaching mismanagement. It's a broad way to paint it, but there was issues personnel wise that I don't think they managed very well. And if you can't block and you can't run, that's going to put a lot of pressure on a very young quarterback. So offensively, I would say they need to improve a lot on the offensive line. Defensively, probably on the back end, but honestly, I'm more curious of how they replace Walter Nolan, Jared Ivey's, JJ Pegues's of the world, because that was a really nasty defensive front when they're all healthy together. And so those would be the two areas. It's really the two trenches. Put both sides of the line of scrimmage. I'm not saying they're going to be. I think they'll be pretty good on the defensive line again. But the offensive line, it's kind of one of those things that I'm going to have to see it before I believe it, because last year was kind of a mess.
Yeah, I just remember watching Ole Miss a bunch of times yesterday when the front seven was healthy. They were probably one of the best front sevens, to be quite honest, in the country, to be quite honest. So let's head into 2025. Looking at the schedule. Not easy by any stretch of the imagination. Obviously, they start off with Georgia State. That's in Oxford. Dicey, but they should win that one. Then they'll have revenge on their minds. Second week of the season. At Kentucky, they'll want to put in a good performance there. They get Arkansas at home. It's a night game. Georgia State's a night game too. Look, Arkansas in Oxford, again, could be a tricky game, but I have them probably winning that one. Then they get Tulane at home. Like you said, the last time they played them, it was really a toss-up. Then, of course, they get LSU in Oxford. So, again, the first 5 games, not easy. Then they're off. Home against Washington State, which Washington State's part of the Pac, whatever it is. Then, of course, a big one at Georgia. That's in Athens. At Oklahoma. Oklahoma, again, they still have to prove it to me. They haven't so far. South Carolina at home. Everyone's expecting big things out of South Carolina this year. Then they play the Citadel, who seems to be a punching bag for SEC opponents or ACC opponents late in the season. Again, they'll have revenge on their mind against Florida. Then they're off, and of course, the traditional Egg Bowl, Thanksgiving weekend. So I've got a couple of games circled here, Brian. I've got the LSU game circled, obviously. Telltale sign where the program might be at. At Georgia, obviously, we know what happened last year. It's going to be a raucous crowd. I'm discounting Oklahoma because it's just, again, nah. South Carolina game's tricky. And of course, Florida comes to the swamp, but I think the Gators will probably be beat up by then with the schedule they have. So I've got the LSU game and the Georgia game, possibly the South Carolina game, makes or breaks their season.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The thing that sticks out to me about this schedule for Ole Miss is they have 8 home games, and partially the reason for that is because Wake Forest, a couple of days before Ole Miss beat them by however many points they did, bailed out of the contract and bailed for the return game. So that put Ole Miss in like a multi-year scheduling issue to where they had to scramble to get Washington State on the schedule. So there's 8 home games, 4 road games, which you don't see very often. And I think it's beneficial for Ole Miss because under Kiffin, they don't really lose at home very often. That LSU game will be incredibly tough for them at home. And then, I think South Carolina could be as well, but I like Ole Miss's chances in that game, particularly with it being in Oxford. It's one of those things where can you go 7-1 at home and split the 2 toughest road games for me are probably Georgia and Oklahoma. I don't really know what the state of Oklahoma will be at that point. But I mean, that's just going to Norman. That's a tough place to go and play and come out with a win. Just ask Alabama, whose playoff dreams got ruined there last year. Can you find a way to go 7-1 at home and then split those 2 road games and go 3-1 on the road? Well, that's going to get you in the playoff. And this is another year where Ole Miss is not necessarily forecasted. They'll be a good team, but they're not a preseason playoff trendy pick to make the playoff, win the national title. And so this is kind of where Kiffin is, I won't say thrive because that's selling him a little bit short, but they went 10-2 in 2023 with a hell of a lot less talent than 2024 when they went 9-3. And I think the reason for that is nobody really expected Ole Miss to make, what was the last iteration of the 4-team playoff in 23. And so they got 8 home games. The schedule's not easy at all. It's just the flip version from a conference perspective as last year. So if this team went 8-4, would it stun me? No. If they went 10-2 and back into their way into a playoff spot, would it stun me as well? No, not at all. And I'm fascinated to see which one of those turns becomes true. I don't know which one it'll be, but neither would surprise me. There's enough talent on the roster.
To piggyback off that, if Kiffin does go 8-4, you're going to hear rumblings.
It'll just be a frustrated, what's up? Why can't this guy get over the hump thing? And, the lifeblood of any program now, recruiting, but an extension of that is donations to pay these kids salaries, because that's exactly what it is. There might be a little hang up there. Lane Kiffin would have to commit a felony to get fired at this point. He's won a ton. I mean, he's won 39 games in 3 years. It's a run that Ole Miss football has not seen in the modern era. So yes, there will be, if they go 8-4, there will be some disappointment, but depending on how the 8-4 looks, you can sell it. You got Austin Simmons, presumably for at least another year, maybe 2. He's done a good job in the portal, retooling the roster. So yes, 8-4 would be disappointing. At this point, that's kind of below Ole Miss fans' expectations, which is also a testament to where Kiffin has raised the floor of the program. But it would depend to me on how it looks. I wouldn't be surprised by either result. But again, I for whatever reason, when Lane's not kind of the center of the spotlight, they tend to play a lot better. So I would actually lean closer to 9-3, and 10-2 wouldn't stun me. But 8-4, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be interested to see. Like I said, the first 4 games, I think they win. It might be a little bit tougher than they might expect. But I think they'll be 4-0 after those games. LSU Saturday, September 27th. LSU is going to make that an 8:00 game. Because of nighttime. Again, you talked about Washington State. They're probably going to beat the holy hell out of Washington State. And again, at Georgia, is it going to be a 3:30 game? Is it going to be an 8:00 game? 7:00 game? You don't know. Again, you talked about Oklahoma. Brett Venables, I still need to see it out of that program, out of that team, that they can compete with some of the big boys. South Carolina, just based on what they did last year. And, of course, Florida, again, I think by November 15th, they're going to be beat up. If they can keep Lagway even healthy, to be quite honest with you. So, 9-3, 10-2, somewhere in there for me. They don't get Texas, which is good. Although they beat Texas last year, didn't they?
No, so it's the same schedule this year, just flipped the venues.
Okay.
So Mississippi State got Texas. Ole Miss did not, which is fortunate. Ole Miss, in this where they expanded to 16 teams, they avoided Alabama, Texas, and Auburn, which Auburn's not the greatest state of the program right now, but Ole Miss has not beaten Auburn very often in their history, particularly their recent history. So Ole Miss got the longer end of the stick in terms of the scheduling, particularly compared to their in-state opponents, because Mississippi State, I know their program's not in great shape, but my God, that's a pretty rough schedule that they're going to have to repeat this year. So yeah, avoiding Texas is a big one for Ole Miss.
So before I let you go, I'm always curious. Talk to everybody across the country about the whole state of college football and where it's at with NIL and the transfer portal and all this stuff. I mean, you're in the thick of it in the SEC. I've talked to other SEC reporters that covered Alabama and Florida and Auburn and a couple of the other schools. Brian, I blame Greg Sankey for all this. He got the ball rolling with the whole, Oklahoma, Texas, if you want to come in, and then the dominoes just fell. Of course, the settlement with the NIL stuff, it just takes away. See, I'm an old head. I'm an old fuddy-duddy. I like the way it was 30, 40 years ago. Everything was regional. It was sectional. You kept the rivalries. Now, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, it still has a luster, but it sort of lost some of the luster because Mississippi State's program has been so bad. Where does Ole Miss, where does Kiffin and the AD, the president, where do they stand with all this? I'm sure it's got to be frustrating to the point where kids aren't going to school anymore to get an education. They're going to make money and play football, and that's the end of it.
Ole Miss was in a unique perspective when this all happened because it was at the very beginning of the Kiffin era. And I've written about this. I wrote a long story on Ole Miss's collective, the Grove Collective, a little, I guess, 18, 19 months ago. Ole Miss viewed it as an opportunity. It was a football program on the rise. The rules in July 1st, 2021, or whatever the hell it was, changed overnight. And Ole Miss capitalized on it. They were one of the earliest to get organized from a collective perspective. The guys that started their collective had the wherewithal to started as a for-profit entity that didn't make any money because the ones that started as nonprofits, the IRS, about a year and a half later, just nuked that because it's what is your charitable purpose to pay kids to play football? Not really how that works. And so Ole Miss, Ole Miss is fighting a resources battle. They, from an alumni and a donor base, they don't have the resources of a Texas or a Texas A&M. But they were one, good in football at the right time. They got people engaged. They were winning at an incredibly high clip, and their collective, to everyone's credit, for a school that's kind of historically behind on a lot of things, they got ahead of this. They hired Walker Jones, the former global marketing director at Under Armour, to run this as a full-time employee. And they got people engaged and organized. And so Ole Miss, the way I would describe it is Ole Miss has taken advantage of a really screwed up system, and they've capitalized on it. And it's interesting. I like Lane Kiffin press conferences can be boring when you're asking him about the day-to-day minutia of the football team and who's hurt and who's not. He's not going to tell you anything. But when you get him going on the big picture of college football, he's really smart and he's really enlightening, where he says, we've taken advantage of this better than anybody, but that doesn't mean we like the system. It's screwed up. He's like, this can't continue. And I think where people get things conflated is NIL versus this unlimited transfer thing. Like, we actually had a pretty good system. I even didn't mind the one-time free transfer. And Kiffin started capitalizing that in the portal because I was wondering whether his portal strategy was going to work. And it's actually, this is smarter because if you get a portal kid, now they're stuck. Their one-time free transfer is gone. You actually have more control over him than a high school kid. Well, then 12 months later, that's totally gone by the wayside because these kids can move wherever they want, when they want now. And so, yes, the NIL piece of it is – when people start throwing around financial terms and revenue sharing stuff, I get fans get very aggravated and nauseated by it. It's totally understandable. You just want to see them put the ball down and play on Saturday afternoons. But I think what's really underscored the chaos more so than just finding a way to get these kids paid is the fact that they can move around every year, twice a year now. What if the NFL had free agency twice a year? What if after the season they had free agency, and then after like OTAs, it's like, oh, you can move anywhere you want again. And by the way, if the team's like, no, you can't move, you can just throw your middle finger at them. Like, no, I am moving. Like that part to me is what has got to get under control. I think this House settlement is far from the final template of what college football will look like in the future, but at least there's something in place. At least we can have the federal government argue about it for 3 years and people sue each other and we get something out of it. What needs to be quelled is this unlimited movement. It makes it impossible to keep up with. It exacerbates the money problem because these kids basically schools for more money. You can transfer one place before the spring, then back, oh, sorry, I would actually like more money, or I'm going to go to another conference and go to another school. And so I think the player movement part, while I'm pro player, I think you should maybe get one free transfer, particularly if your coach leaves or something. That part to me has screwed this up worse than the paying kids. The paying kids part of it is messy. I think they will eventually get a handle on that. But it's not going to matter if you just let these kids move around every semester. They could be full-on employees now, but if you let them move every semester, it's still going to be a mess, and it's not going to be fun to follow.
I've always said when it comes to the transfers thing, you play the full season. After the national championship game is done, national championship games usually on a Monday, you got like a week window to transfer, and that's it. Once that week is over, after the season, you're finished. You're done. I'm like you. I don't like all the movement. Look, even before the transfer portal, when it came to the college football playoff, when it was 4 teams, well, if your team's not in the college football playoff, what do players do? They're not going to go to the bowl game because they're not in the playoff. So They skip the bowl games to go get ready for the draft. this is no different. If you don't make the college football playoff, kids are either going to bolt for a different school before the bowl games start, or they're just going to skip everything altogether and try and get ready for the draft. Again, I'm an old head. I can't stand it. It makes my head spin. Again, Brian, I love the pageantry of it. I love the rivalries. Like you said, just put the football down. Let them play for 60 minutes or overtime or whatnot. All the extracurricular stuff, you can't keep up with it. I tell my viewers all the time, go to the transfer portal one day and see how many players have transferred. Just in the last 5-6 months, it's almost like 2,000 to 3,000. It doesn't make any sense. It's out of control. I said this 5 years ago. Once you open Pandora's box, you cannot put the lid on it. I mean, I don't know how you feel about it. I'm a lot older than you, obviously, but it's like, all right, when they get a handle on this, then it's something else. And then when they get a handle on that, then something else crops up. It's almost like the powers that be didn't think, oh, yes, well, this particular scenario is never going to come up. And then it comes up. And then everything is screwed.
Yeah, the problem is that there is no necessarily powers that be. The only governing body for college football was an entity that wanted to put their head in the sand and act like kids were never going to get paid. So when Armageddon came, it was just like, oh, and then, I mean, that's why you're seeing commissioners beg the federal government, of all people, to try to put some legislation behind this. I mean, I don't know. I've seen, middle school talent shows operate with more efficiency than the federal government. If that's really who you're banking on to get something done and get some legislation in place, that just to me underscores what a panic state that college football is in. And so, look, the paying kids part of it is messy. But if they actually found a way to get a handle on this unlimited movement, and they actually found a way to lock kids into schools for 2 and 3 years, a lot of this like shady paying the kids and them going and re-upping for more money and these non-enforceable, halfway enforceable NIL contracts, a lot of that would take care of itself because there would be no rebidding or re-upping session every time a portal window opens. I agree with you. There needs to be one portal window. I mean, hell, it's so screwed up right now. Kids that aren't playing on playoff teams are actually more incentivized to get in the portal because if their team keeps playing, they're going to miss the window. They get like a 5-day window instead of the 2-week window. So yes, whenever the season ends, there needs to be like a week to get in and then maybe 2 to 3 additional weeks to get out. And then that's it. Find a home and then it's done. But this current model from a player movement standpoint cannot sustain. I do think that the paying kids part of it will eventually get worked out to some degree now that the schools can actually pay them money and the burden is taken, 100% at least, not on the fan anymore and collectives. That'll work itself out. But again, I keep going back to it. They've got to get a handle on this movement piece of it. That's really what's causing chaos.
Yeah, what really aggravated me is when it came out that Nico Iamaleava,
prime example,
particular agent or whatnot, it came out that, okay, I led my team to the playoffs. I want more money. That's the state that we're in. It aggravates me to no end. Before I let you go, though, I have to ask, are the SEC and Big Ten, are they trying to maneuver to break away from everybody and start doing their own thing? I have to ask.
Hell, I don't even know if they're trying. I think it's already taking place. Whenever this new college football playoff structured agreement kicks in, and I can't remember if it's after this past year or after this year or for the 26 or 27 season, but the Big Ten and the SEC in that structure get more say-so in terms of how the playoffs dictated the format and all of that. And so, yes, that's where all of this is headed. I couldn't begin to tell you when and how they break off in this college football thing that's, subsidizes all these other sports, breaks away completely, but that is coming. You could see the writing on the wall ever since they put the framework agreement of whatever the next iteration of this college football playoff is in place. The Big Ten and the SEC, I mean, they're already clamoring for 4 automatic bids apiece in a 16-team playoff. If you look at the actual way that agreement's structured, like they're probably going to get that. So yes, I think they're well on their way to breaking this thing off because they're the 2 best leagues that make the 2 most money. It's kind of how it goes these days, unfortunately.
For some odd reason, my camera seems to have crapped the bed. But anywho, Again, I want to thank Brian Rippee for coming on. Brian, I'm going to do my second annual college football preview special. You're more than welcome to come on. We can talk Ole Miss. We can talk the schedule again. We can talk the SEC in general. Anytime you want to come on, my friend.
Yeah, anytime, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Brian Rippee. I do not know what happened to my camera. Oh, there we go. I don't know what happened. Anybody that knows me, the technology blows with me. Yeah, but when I take a look at Ole Miss's schedule for 2025, and again, I want to thank him for coming on. Yeah, they open up the season August 30th, which is another thing I wish college football would stop doing. I remember back in the old days, college football did not start until the weekend after Labor Day. I wish they would start going back to that. There's no reason to subject these kids to that early of a start, especially in the South or even in the Northeast, across the country, because the temperatures are brutal. I would encourage ADs and presidents across the land to come together collectively and not start college football season until the weekend after Labor Day. But they open with Georgia State. That's home. They should win that one. Again, at Kentucky, they'll have revenge on their mind. Kentucky's kind of fallen down here the last couple of years. Fully expect them to win that. Arkansas, never know what you're going to get. I fully expect them to win that. Tulane, always a tough out. They should win that. Again, the game against LSU, Saturday, September 27th. We will see where both teams are at after this particular game. Then they have a bye week. Play Washington State at home. That'll be a win. Then the following week, they're obviously at Georgia at Sanford Stadium in Athens. Tough. Then they have to go to Oklahoma the following week, but I fully expect them to win that one. South Carolina game on November 1st might be dicey. They'll beat the Citadel November 8th. November 15th, Florida, but they get them at home. Florida, every time they go to Mississippi, whether it's Ole Miss or Mississippi State, they struggle. Then they have another bye week the weekend before Thanksgiving, and obviously the Egg Bowl on Friday the 28th. So I'm not going to make any predictions. If I had to make a prediction today, I would say they go 10-2. I think they probably will lose to Georgia. Probably lose against LSU. But we'll see. But LSU's a home game. Out of their first 5 games, the only road games at Kentucky. And revenge will be on their mind. And then after that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They only have 3 road games out of their last 7. So again, only 4 away games. So I'm sorry. Yeah, only 4 away games, 8 home games. Again, I want to thank Brian Rippee for joining. It was a pleasure. Great insight into Ole Miss football upcoming. I will see everybody at 8 o'clock over on the No Filter Network for another edition of Early Eating Sports Buffet with the Ginch. It is friggin' brutally hot. I'm sitting here in the air conditioning and I'm still hot. So, again, thanks to him. I will see everybody on the flip side over on the No Filter Network for Early Eating Sports Buffet with the Ginch. So let's play a little more of REM. Let's redo it, shall we?
That's great. It starts with an earthquake, birds and snakes, an airplane. Lenny Bruce is not afraid. I have a hurricane. Listen to yourself. Churn world serves its own needs. Dummy serve your own needs. Beat it up and not speak. Grunt, no strength. The ladder starts to clatter with fear. Fight down, high wire in a fire. Represented 7 games in a government for hire in a combat site. Left to us are coming in a hurry with the furies.